I'm going to show you some materials. They'll be available as well as the slide deck. We'll send that in a follow-up email, so you'll have it in PDF, but also you'll have the Excel workbook in Excel in case you want to like borrow any of those reports and mess around with them. So yes, materials after, and please questions throughout. I love having a small group because it's fun to share stories, and we can share stories and questions, and that makes it all the richer. Okay, so let's see. Are you seeing my full screen, Sarah? Can you see the full slide?
Yep,
Okay, cool.
I can see
Sometimes
it.
I share my little note screen, which is fine, but then you just see what I put to myself. Smile. Sometimes. All right. Oh, here we go. Acknowledgements. The workshop is supported by the Communities of Opportunity Learning Community. Yay! Learning communities. And you all touch that in some way. And so we're always grateful to the Communities of Opportunity Learning Community, King County, Seattle Foundation, Cascadia Consulting, Sarah Tran, for making it possible for us to all come together. All right. We already did introductions, so this is great. I'll just go over a couple logistics. We've got names and some background on everyone. Thank you, thank you. Please ask questions as we go. I'll monitor the chat. Sarah will help monitor the chat. But also please just come off mute and speak if you feel up for it. And then again, thanks to Alyssa. Okay. So today's learning objectives, I think everyone's here with a different level of experience, which is so cool because I think there's something all of you can get from today's conversation. The aim of this is really to talk with folks who aren't necessarily the finance person about how to do financial oversight. So those of you who are finance people, you might look at this from the lens of, well, share your wisdom with the group, and also, what is my non-finance leader in need of, or what's the perspective for them, or what might help them feel comfortable and confident in getting their arms around the finances of the organization. So our 3 objectives for today are to be able to assess our own organization's financial oversight function. So we're going to get an idea of what's under that umbrella, and we're going to start thinking through, hey, how would we go about assessing that? What do we know to be true so far? And where do we already see some gaps we could make goals around? We're going to increase our understanding of how to read financial statements and to use them as part of our organization's storytelling. I think, it's always fun to go look at a balance sheet and an income statement and just get some basics on it. Even if it's already like old news to you, you can look at, maybe you can pick up a new way of explaining something on it to somebody else. And then work to increase confidence in how to apply financial oversight practices and tools in your organization. And that is one of my personal callings, is that, I think this is an area rife with historic inequity, white supremacy, patriarchy. And so it's an area that's very charged for many of us to come into. I recognize I bring a lot of privilege into this space as a white person talking about finance. And I also am a witness to how I participate in, and people in my community participate in, trying to keep other people out of this conversation using confusing language and shame and really strict rules. And like, I buy into it from both sides because I've worked in nonprofits and for funders. And anyway, so I'm committed to working in this space and trying to like break down some of those barriers around like getting into the conversation, feeling confident and comfortable and empowered by being able to talk about finance instead of feeling like that's not for me. That's where I'm coming from. All right. So first thing is like financial oversight, kind of a broad term. Let me move some things around on my screen. And so what is it that we're really talking about here? And what I would love to have you participate in is like, everyone already has an idea of what they might do that is financial oversight. So would love to have you pop into the chat and just say some things you're already doing that is financial oversight. And I'll read them out after I kind of go through some things. All right. I want to blow up the chat here a little bit for me. Patience. Month-end reconciliations. Love them. Yeah, so what we're talking about with financial oversight is an understanding of the financial functions. So all the stuff that has to do with money throughout the organization and in our programs in our annual and long-term planning cycles. So financial oversight is looking back at history, it's figuring out where we are today, and it's planning on where we want to go tomorrow. It's intertwined with all of our strategy and visionary conversations. It can be a part of all of it. It's part of that foundation that allows us to do our work. So it's everywhere. And I like to think about this in like 3 big buckets: where we are now, where we're going, and then what is, and I mean, it's a little cliche, but like, what's the vibe around finance? What is the organizational culture around finance? Budget projections, month-end reconciliations, absolutely all part of doing the financial oversight piece. I often get asked to come into organizations, and Sarah, please feel free to pipe in anytime you want to at all. But I know Sarah also gets asked to come into organizations too, and she sometimes has to look at finances as well. And I always start with, where are we? And I know that seems like overly simplistic maybe, but like that, it's really important to keep it simple because it can be very overwhelming to go into a new space and try and figure out, like, where do I start getting my arms around this? And so what I mean when I'm saying, where are we now, is like, what is the financial story of this work and this organization right now today? And are we able to tell that story? And that covers a whole myriad of things we will go over. And then where we're going is really about the planning. So once we've got to figure out where we are first, though, but once we know where we are, then we can figure out how does the financial story evolve for this organization and for our work. And then around organizational culture, it's really, it starts with the leadership for sure. But what is the feeling around finance and financial oversight in the org? Sometimes when leaders bring in a lot of fear and maybe a little bit of like, don't want to talk about it into the organization, that goes through the whole organization. And so what I look for is like, are there ways to get more people talking about and comfortable with the financial culture at the organization? Someone else popped in, responsible for approvals. Absolutely. Such a critical part of the oversight is like making sure people get paid and we're paying the right amounts. So payroll, AP, also generating lots of reports. Oh my gosh, so many reports for stakeholders, budgeting, and whatever the boss tells me to do. That's absolutely true. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. We're going to drill down a little bit in these 3 areas, and then I'm going to pop into some tools and just some examples of things for you. So when we're talking about where are we now, that's kind of vague, and a lot of it's a technical thing, but part of it is really like, how are we telling our story? Finance is just another language that we tell our story in. So does your organization have the resources to produce timely and accurate financial reports? This is a real cliche in the world of financial assessment, and it's really true. It's really important that you're able to do that as a leader. It's really important you're able to ask for it and you get what you need. And as a team, it's really important that, as like inside that finance world, it's really important that we're working to get out timely and accurate financial reports. And what does that take, right? If it's not happening, which I walk into a lot of organizations where it's not happening, no blame, no shame, it just gets that way sometimes. And so what do you want to make sure? You want to make sure you've got trained and confident finance staff that have the tools and resources and training they need to be able to produce that. And then you got to make sure you got the right systems, software, processes, policy, and oversight. Another thing you might look at when you're figuring out where are we now is, are key stakeholders able to tell the financial story of the organization confidently? And that I'm thinking about the board, managers and leaders, also the staff, and I would say also funders are a great stakeholder too. We send them a lot of financial information. Are we sure they understand our financial information? And so we can work to train all kinds of folks in our world about what our financial story is and how we want them to think about it. And so some of the things we look at in this space are, making sure we're investing in staff and that we have staff and or consultants who can support our finance needs. financial reports. We're going to look at some dashboard ideas. I'm a big fan of dashboards. Less is more sometimes with financial information, but really knowing who your audience is. It's really tempting to just like hand the board or staff a stack of financial statements and be like, this is transparency. But really transparency is about, hey, do these folks know how to read this statement? Do they know what it means? Do I know what it means? Is there a way I can make this more digestible and understandable for folks? And dashboards are a really great way to take just key information and make it super readable and digestible, and interesting to look at. And we'll look at a few of those. And oh, just another person joined. Thank you. And then also thinking about how we train our audiences to read and understand reports. And we can use the very reports themselves to do that. I'll show you an example of a dashboard that does that. But making sure that like we can tell the story so that we can explain the story to other folks who might have the same kind of blocks we've seen before with finance. So a good place to start. Where are we now? How's it going? Then if we shift over to this idea of like, where are we going? We're really talking about what are our financial goals, and really what are our programmatic and organizational goals, and how does finance invest in and propel those ideas and goals forward. And the two main places we can look at this are like short-term planning and long-term planning. So short-term planning, stuff like the annual budget, which for many of us is just like a check mark we have to do. It can also be a very cool process for thinking about, for an impetus to really think about what exciting things your organization can do. And there's another workshop coming up in about a week and a half, and Jemay will be co-leading it with me, and it will be on planning and forecasting and modeling. So a little bit of a deeper dive into this, where are you going? But some of the things that we will look at in that workshop, but that I want you to keep in mind is who gets to be involved in creating the plans. The more the merrier is my motto about that. Are we even doing short-term and long-term planning? Like, are we just creating a one-sheet budget because funders ask for it and the board has to pass something? Or are we really using it as a planning tool? So that might be budget, strategic plan. I know someone's in that mode right now. And then I always recommend when you do a multi-year strategic plan that you back that up with some kind of simple financial model. And we will talk about that in the next workshop a little bit more. Jemay has some experience with that. And then what are the principles, goals, or North Stars guiding your financial plans? It's really, we can get so bogged down in the numbers. And when I look at a financial statement, I'm pretty excited to get into the numbers, but it helps to really frame things with our words first. And so thinking about, what are those organizational values? How do they show up in the financial pieces of our organization thinking and planning? So do we have a clear logic model or case statement? How is investing, or where we put our resources, or how we talk about money? How is that incorporated or not incorporated in those values that we hold? And then does the org hold itself accountable to those plans? So part of long-term planning is saying, oh, well, this is what we thought would happen, and this is what's actually happening. And we can talk about it and talk about if we're going to stick with our thoughts or if we're going to go in a different direction. And so we do that in the practical sense through reporting to budget, telling the great stories, and also learning how to tell the really tough stories clearly. Okay, and then the third place to dive into a little bit more is our organizational culture around finance and money. And a couple places, I have a checklist too that has some of these things on it later that you can think through as a group or an individual is like, okay, what is our organizational financial culture? I would say, hey, these would be my 3 words around what I hope for everybody's organizational financial culture: transparency, accountability, and then a strong set of ethics. And so a couple questions to ask: how widely throughout the organization is financial info spread? So I've worked with a lot of organizations that consider themselves to be transparent. Most nonprofits are, but very few of them would ever say, like, we're not transparent around financial information. If an organization is not sharing financial information, it's usually a matter of feeling like there's a lack of interest, or there's just not enough time to figure out how to get information out to people. So that's one thing to think about is, what I would say financial transparency is not only making sure people have the information, but they understand what it means. So that means doing some, like, a budget 101 training once a year with your staff to say, this is coming up and this is your part in it. Does the org tell the hard stories as well as the wins? That's a really important one. When people do surveys of staff and they talk about the level of trust they have in the organization, one of the things that they talk about is whether money can be a very mysterious place for staff, and the way staff most often experience the financial piece of the organization, if they're not involved in decision making, is their salary and how well resourced they are to do the work they have to do. And so, we have this history of underinvesting in the nonprofit sector. A lot of times the stories staff are telling them are not great stories about money in the organization. And so one of the ways, staff know when things are going well and staff know when things are not going well. So being able to talk frankly about the challenges with staff in an appropriate way, can't take them on all the ups and downs of the roller coaster, but it's a really important way to build trust because they already know what's going on. And so when you take accountability and responsibility for that storytelling, you can go a long way to getting folks to come along that journey with you and thinking you're pretty awesome for being able to talk about the hard stuff. And then how is the organization holding donors, clients, community leaders, funders accountable in their financial dealings with your organization? It is a really important part of how we build our financial culture. And it's a place where we can find ourselves forced into, like, a contradiction of our values sometimes, when we feel like we've got to be in relationship with people, particularly I'm thinking funders outside the organization, along in a financial relationship that's not aligned with our internal values. And so, as again, like North Star, as we always try to work towards the North Star, this is another place to look so that there is that consistency of holding.
Can you give an example about that, Amy? Is there any story that comes up for you?
Yeah. I mean, one of the ways I think about it a lot is, one of the ways I see it come up is when we're asked to talk about the costs of our program and I would say this is just I'm thinking just financially, like we asked to talk about the costs of our program, and we know that, like, oh, well, let's not put this piece in it because they don't like paying for that. Let's not put this piece in it because they don't like paying for that. Oh, well, we can't give raises because the funders won't pay people more for the work we're doing. Like, that is a way we've been trained to think and prepare to ask funders for money. And what that really does is is we are then colluding with our funders in keeping resources down inside of our organizations. And we're creating this false story that doesn't include total costs for what it really costs to do the work we're doing. That's when I see that we fall into the most often, not our fault, but we will feel better in the world about the way we go about our work if we're able to say both to our staff and to our funders, this is the reality of what it costs to do our work. And this is the support we need in order to continue to do it. That's the example I can think of. Can anyone else think of an example? Maybe some will come to you. Thanks for asking that, Sarah. Next, does the organization have a solid set of processes and policies around financial activities? Kind of the boring part. I don't like writing processes and policies, but they're really important. And what's really important about them is that they are clear and accessible. So policies that are so complicated to understand who's responsible for what don't serve us. And then we teach people the how and the why of compliance around that. And there's lots of places you can source them online. You can ask peers to share. You can ask someone from the outside to come in and help you write them. I even help write them, even though I don't like them. But it's a really important part. Everyone knowing how they do it right so that they follow grant guidelines and that they're following the law and that we're getting ready to do, doing it in a way that doesn't bother our auditors or donors or whoever is scrutinizing our work. So it's an important part. And then is the org, another place to look is the org compliant with funding guidelines, filing requirements, et cetera. So a couple of you have talked about the complexity of doing grant reporting. It is really hard. And our systems, even if we have the most expensive systems in the world, they're usually not adequate to capture the full complexity of tracking grant funding, spending, the timing of when payments come in, and if we ask for reimbursement or if we get things ahead, if they're restricted or unrestricted. When we have a program that's funded by multiple funders, I mean, there's just it is very complex, and making sure that we are, putting the time and energy and resources into creating systems that make sure we're doing it right is like a huge relief. I know a lot of leaders that spend a couple sleepless nights thinking, am I double dipping? Which is, a common phrase around federal grant compliance. Or, am I using up money that's supposed to be earmarked for something I said I was going to do next year? It's hard to keep all that in our head. All right, well, let's take a look at this financial oversight checklist. So we've talked about some of these big areas, and I'm just going to check my notes really quick here.
As Amy's checking her notes, I'm really curious to hear from folks around, as you think about this framework that Amy laid out in terms of using finances to understand the story about where are we now, where are we going, and then what is the culture of our organization when it comes to finances and money, essentially. I'm curious what's come up for folks, what like right now, is your organization more focused on just trying to figure out where are we now? What is going on in terms of our money? What are our major expenses and where is money coming from into the organization? Or are you more focused on, like Shiho was talking about with the People's Economy Lab and, strategic planning? Are you thinking more around where are we trying to go, right? Like we know where we are, but where are we trying to go? Or are you in a place where, and it's not mutually exclusive, but, are you in a place where you're trying to figure out how to better address finances within and across your organization? Because I can definitely tell you that in my former experiences as an executive director, or the times I've been an interim executive director in an organization, one, I always feel overwhelmingly busy. So what Amy said about like finance is absolutely taking up a lot of my time, but then me feeling unable to even find time to like train other staff around it or figure out how to talk to other staff around it sometimes. That has always been a challenge in most of the organizations that I've been a part of. And then also because money, even outside of our organizations in our sector, money itself, right, in so many of our cultures is such a taboo subject. It causes so much anxiety and fear, even our personal finances, which I can certainly attest to, that it's hard to talk about it and to talk about it with other people. It feels vulnerable. I've worried about how will staff take this, or what will funders or donors think, especially if I don't feel a sense of real understanding or control over our own story, and where we are now and where we're trying to go. So I'm just curious, folks, if unmute yourself or chime in on the chat, but would really love to hear what's come up for you and just this beginning, kind of reflection on this framework of where are we now, where we're trying to go, and the financial culture of your organization. What really resonated or struck you?
I can speak up. For me, talking about this does give me a little anxiety because of what I've gone through at this organization in particular. And I've really been focusing on how to make things better going forward instead of focusing on what went wrong, which has been a huge shift for me. With that said, I came into the organization and the culture around finances was a really big scarcity mindset. And I hold that too in my personal life. And I worked really hard to try and curb that at the organization, which thankfully over the last almost 4 years now, it's gotten a lot better. The problem I run across the most is the distrust that might come from like frontline staff to leadership and how finances play a huge role in that, and trying to find ways to not be a part of the problem in that as well. And along with a few other things that you said, we're very much in a place where we don't know where we're going right now, and that's the thing we're focusing on. We've done a lot of work in the month-to-month processes and the month-to-month activities, but we're really trying to focus on 1 to 5 year type of things. And that overwhelms me, to be honest, because I just hold too much right now. So like I said, when I was coming in, like I'm super focused on how I can support our leadership going forward, so I don't have to hold as much as like the emotional stuff, and people can start to feel more confident, and we can start to have these conversations, be good or bad. And I'll end with this. My biggest issue with our finance committee right now that I'm having is I created an entire new financial packet, which is beautiful. It's great, went over wonderful. They love it. I'm just trying to get more interaction from our board as far as telling the story and trying to convey to them that it's not best practices for me to enter the data and tell the story. Because that's what we ran across last time, and that's how things get missed, or things get shoved under the rug, or what have you. So I don't know if anyone has any advice for how to convey that. I've tried a few different avenues for that, but again, people just get kind of uncomfy, especially when it's been a sore subject over years.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. I really want to share my appreciation for your willingness to be so honest, and also to share my empathy, because I have definitely been in similar situations where finances the financial story and experience at an organization has been not only really hard, but at times even traumatic, and that's so real. And it really does affect everybody in different ways, but particularly the staff members who have been saddled with the primary responsibility for it. And I definitely hear your question about like how do we try to share some of that responsibility and the power, right? And together
Yes.
turn something that can feel so heavy and so burdensome into hopefully a strength and a tool and a mechanism to get where we want to go. And your question about, how to get the board more involved in telling the story, I love that you put that out to the group, and I'm curious what other folks' responses or experiences have been around that in terms of your board's engagement with finances and helping to tell the story.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Folks, please unmute yourselves. We have a small group. We're supposed to have 20 people in, and I wouldn't be surprised if more folks keep popping on. But we're small enough that it would be great to just have a conversation and hear from folks.
Yeah, I can jump in. The thing that is, and I mentioned, I've only been here a year. I have spent way too much time looking backwards, and I would rather be looking forwards. But I have had to spend a lot of time trying just to even figure out what has led us to the point we're at right now, and uncovering a lot of things I wish I wasn't uncovering, like a lot of misinformation, lack of information. We're also right now in the process of switching to a completely new accounting software package because we just cannot get any reliable information with our current system. And that can be the human element, the software element. There's a lot of pieces there, but just things like in talking about like the board, I can't even get the board to read some reports sometime. They'll comment on them without having seen them, but they're not actually taking in the information. And then there's things like somehow the board got convinced, I don't know where, that our organization is like destined to fail and we need like a 2-year reserve of funds, and I have no idea where they got this idea, and I'm trying to convince them that that's absolutely not the case. So all this to say is I'm spending way too much time looking backwards, and we can't get to the point yet of planning for our future. Like I said during a meeting at one point, and this is based on some of like my education and background, I was like, yeah, we need like a 1, 3, 5-year plan. And everyone just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, so we'll start small. So yeah, it's just we're unfortunately very stuck in the trying to even resolve everything to get to the present. That looking the board, one of the board directors was actually saying they would love to see, us planning a budget to like 2026. I was like, yeah, I would too. I'm happy we finally got through like the budget process for, fiscal year 2024.
Yeah. Really common challenges. Does anyone else have a challenge or something that's going well around this topic of how to get the board involved? I have some ideas I'll share too, but would love to hear from folks.
I can share.
Please do, Falake, and welcome.
Thank you. So what we're going through is our organization was founded in 2018, and I came on board after everyone had sort of already gotten together, already written the proposal. And they had a planning document, they had an MOU, but with the finances, it was kind of just like an afterthought until issues arose. And then those issues just kept coming up because either the organization who took on the finances wasn't ready or wasn't prepared or just didn't have the skill set to do it. So there was always things falling through the crack. There was always issues with people getting in their invoices in late. And so it was always an issue kind of happening in the background until it became like a very large issue. And I think that happened because these group of people are also somehow friends, or like they know each other in like a non-professional way. And so when there were issues, it wasn't really enacted because I think it was awkward to kind of like penalize your friend or something. Or like no one wanted to be the bad person and say, oh, I'm taking your money away, or you're on probation, or whatever it is, because it's like a shared leadership model. And I think that led to a lot of issues with where we are now with just this situation dragging on for so long. And I obviously, like, they're more senior to me, so it's not like I could just be like, hey, I'm taking your money away. Yeah, I'm sort of in the project manager role. So I could report it, but if they're not enforcing or enacting any of the rules that we created, then it festers. So we're at a point where it's just like all out in the open. We're trying to figure out how to maybe change the fiscal responsibility to someone else or something else where it's not like reliant on one person that, obviously there's been historical issues with. And so it was just brought up, I think, Justin, you brought it up about maybe just where could that lie where it's not just like kind of stuck with one gatekeeper. Is it a software? Maybe we need to look into getting an accountant for our own collaborative instead of using an organization's accountant. So we're back into the brainstorming phase of how do we get our finances on track, because again, I'm the project manager and I'm the one who's like, hey, tracking the deliverables and the scope of work and everything. And my meetings get hijacked because the budget issue comes up and it takes over the whole meeting, all the 2 hours that we spent. And I'm like, hey, I had a full agenda. Not to only talk about the budget. Can we please get this done? So, we can move the work forward. So hopefully I don't know, outsourcing the financial piece will just help everyone get like whatever reporting that they want to see in real time, not having to wait for someone to, reply to an email or their accountant to provide the data. So yes, that's where we are. Looking forward to any just sort of suggestions or advice on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of alignment here in the challenges that we have. Well, I'm going to pop over to a tool that we might use to frame some of these conversations, and would love it if more folks want to share. Actually, let me take a beat and just say, if more folks want to share, please jump in. I got so excited to share some tools, but okay, I'm going to pop over there, but we can share anytime. Again, we're a small group. Let me do share screen. So it's clear that your experience aligns with this idea here of this arrow where we're constantly on this arrow somewhere. Organizations sometimes, sometimes it's a circle, not an arrow, but that we are in a constant state of evolution around our financial oversight and our needs and how well we feel like we're meeting our needs. We're almost always trying to catch up with this, right? We rarely sit down and are like, hey, let's anticipate when we get more successful and more complicated, how we might want the financial oversight to go then, or how should we have accountability go then? So totally normal to feel like we're catching up. So I have this arrow thinking about the different state to relate to our financial development as a natural evolution and a movement through stages, instead of relating to it like it should be this and we are this, like it should be good and we are bad, instead of sticking with the binary, because that just gets us all caught up in our own shame spirals about not balancing our own personal checkbook or whatever. We all have stuff about this for sure. So sometimes organizations are just getting started, and you're always going to focus on the program first and doing the good work, getting bills paid, getting people paid. And you have limited resources usually for capacity building. So you might be in that phase where you're just starting to put in some infrastructure. There's always a little bit of resistance. People don't know how to do it. So setting some real intentional goals about moving to that next stage is great. Then there's the growing org stage. We spend a lot of time here. We're getting there. We have increased funding. We've got some program success. We might have a little bit of capacity building investment available. We need more financial systems and staff. One of those big questions is always outsource or in-house. Outsourcing is like paying the people who are the experts to just spend just the time they need on your stuff. Great benefits in that. The problem is there's often a delay in how quickly we're getting financial information back. So there are some financial systems where you can have access as it goes. You can negotiate with your outsourced folks about how do we get stuff more timely so we can use it to make management decisions. Or it might be the time that you want to take some of that expertise in-house and think about what, is there still a part we could leave outsourced, a part we could take inside? Lots of considerations in that. And this is a time where your board's really going through a transition too. That story about where everyone's friends, like if I'm going to start a 501c3, I'm definitely getting people I love and trust to be on that board to help me get it started. But it's really hard to shift when you're getting bigger and more sophisticated to that board where you really need someone to hold you accountable. And then, the North Star of financial oversight, gold medal. And this, I would say, feels elusive for most organizations I know, but is something we aim for, which is to be able to invest all the required resources in financial oversight and infrastructure, to have a very strong culture of transparency and accountability. Your board gets it. They're participating in a way that's supportive and helpful. Staff gets it. And the board and leadership are confident in the financial management. So no one's worried. They're not asking the weird questions, but they're asking questions. They're doing their governance, but they're focusing mostly on the big picture and not on how much we're spending on parking. So love to hear if you think about this from a 1, 2, 3 with 1 getting started and 3 financial oversight gold medal, like you can use decimal points, but where do you think your organization is? Would love to have folks just pop a number in the chat. Won't ask you to elaborate, but just think it's helpful for us to see where we all are. There we go, chat. Yeah, right in the middle, right? That's where most of us are. We're right in the middle somewhere, for sure. Well, one of the ways that we can figure out kind of where we are in that is by using a couple of tools. I'm going to share this finance tool, that financial checklist tool, really quickly. We don't need to dive into it. It's very self-explanatory, but it's just a little checklist. It's in Excel, so you can totally customize it to your organization, what makes sense. Got some categories over here though. So looking at the actual, that sort of where are we now finance team, the where are we now and where are we going reporting section, the culture around compliance, here's some more planning, looking ahead piece. And so it asks questions like, is the work done on time and accurately? That's a big one. And, you might have a couple different people fill this out. You might have the board fill it out and your finance person fill it out. And, you can change this rating system if something else works better. But I go through this with new clients often, and it helps them see where, first of all, it helps us take credit and rest easy on stuff that's actually handled, because sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for the things that are going well. It highlights those things. The purple, I think, is some of the most important. If we don't know how things are, we, can prioritize figuring that out. And then recognizing, where do we have the gaps and how we close the gaps. And that's really what the action plan is about, to be able to prioritize, because we can't do everything all at once. And we don't have to fix it all by ourselves. We can bring board members into this conversation if we feel like that would be helpful. We can bring outside consultants in. We can, I will give you an email. You can email the finance helpline and ask quick questions there too. So lots of places to get supported in this. Yeah, I mean, Justin, here I hear you. Like, this could, even today, I have the notes from when I went over this yesterday. I was like, there's not enough detail in this. Then I was like, Amy, keep it simple, because you can always put more in. But sometimes these things can feel really, this is more of a feeling about stuff, right? Than a technical, what does the balance sheet say? But yes, everyone will get these workshop materials. Okay, so that's one tool. Let's pop over and look at a couple more slides. Okay. Oh, no, don't do it that way. I'm going to share. I'm going to fix my share. Make it go to the other thing. Okay. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at, I think in the interest, let's take a look at a couple of basics around about how you might approach reading financial statements. So now we're just kind of getting into the, like, there's a lot of structure components and a lot about the conversation. And also there's just these like financial statements that are very complicated to read. And sometimes we don't even have them. And so let's just dive in, because this is a really important part of the financial oversight. I'm just making sure I have the right screen up. Yeah, okay. A really important part of the financial oversight piece. So why do we care about financial statements? Because they answer some really great questions. And they're a really good way for us to see that first thing on the checklist, like, is the work being done on time and accurately? I ask this question, verbally, but I don't have it down here. But like, are we able to produce financial statements is actually a question I start with. And I have worked with a lot of organizations that answer no to that question. There's no shame in being there, right? Like, but it's a very good routine to get into, and setting yourself a cycle of committing to produce these can create a domino effect that really does get a lot of other things handled. And it's just a very key compliance piece in the world of accounting. And so here's some of the questions that having these statements can answer. How much cash do we have? It's a great question. Many of us rely on logging into our bank account to figure out how much cash we have, which is a totally great way to check and make sure. There's a little bit of difference that happens with checks that are outstanding, payments we know are coming in, that our financial statements can give us a little bit more access to. Are we spending more money than we're bringing in? We all worry about this. Our financial statements can tell us this. How much do we owe in the next year? So I might have a lot of money now, but do I have a big loan payment coming up? And then how are we doing compared to our budget? Do we have some savings tucked away? all questions that can help us sleep better at night, all questions that can be answered by your financial statements. So let's take a look at a couple of types of reports and where financial statements fit in. I know a lot of boxes. Don't worry about this too much. We're looking at the stuff in the red today. Financial statements, when we're talking about financial statements, we're really talking about two reports. And they have, of course, in order to keep people very confused about them, they have different names in the nonprofit and the for-profit worlds. But I've got this handy guide. You're going to get a copy of this slide. Anytime you forget, you can come back here. The two main statements are the income statement and the balance sheet. And those are the most widely used phrases for those reports. In nonprofit nomenclature in the accounting world, income statement is referred to also as the statement of activities. So you might be familiar with that. And the balance sheet is called the statement of position. And we'll talk a little bit about those names, but those are the two key statements that we should be putting out on a fairly regular basis. We should be giving those to our board so they can do their fiduciary oversight responsibility. And they can actually also be useful in the leadership conversation about the organization. You know, once you kind of get the basics down, I highly recommend going to a more detailed level and getting some other financial reports generated regularly, like department profit and loss, or, you know, grant spending to date, or program spending to date. You know, get into the workings of the organization and get some reports going that will really help your team members make good decisions about the work they're doing. And then dashboards are a really great way to build that transparency and to build that conversation. They're also a great way to get the board focused or get leadership or staff focused on the things you want them to focus on. Because it basically says, here's these complicated statements. We're of course going to give them to you, but I'm going to just take a smear off the top of them and put it on this dashboard. And this is what I really want you paying attention to. And then all the compliance stuff, audits, audited financial statements, 990s, grant and funding reports, all critical parts of the reporting process too. So let's take a look at an income statement and just talk about, I just want you to focus on a couple things that are important about each of these two statement groups. Income statement. So both of the main statements just contain really two different things and the difference between those two things. So on the income statement, the name's the clue, it's going to show you what your income and your expenses are. That's every income statement is going to have that. Income minus expenses, what we made or lost over a period of time. So it's also called the profit and loss, also called statement of financial activities. So many words. It's really how much we made in a period of time, how much we spent in a period of time, and whether we made or lost money in that period of time. It's a statement that covers like a month or a quarter from January 1st to March 31st or a year. So it's a statement of all the activities that happened over a period of time. You know, that's the way I think about it. And some of the questions and answers, are we on budget? And are we spending more money than we're bringing in? So if we look at this income statement, we can see we got the revenue. Every organization is going to have content here, lists here that make sense for them. Here's expenses. This is a very, brief way to talk about expenses. And here's the difference. We made money this month or for this year. So that's what I want you to remember about an income statement. And if you're in a position where you're trying to get other folks to be interested in it, consider doing a training that is like this level of simple. The more we can create a space where these are simple statements that just tell stories, the better off I think we all are. So there's another slide here that kind of gets into some of the details of what gets included in the income statement. But I'm just going to let you read that in the slides later. Because then I want to get to the what is it about a balance sheet. So again, it's two things. It's really two things in each of these statements. So in the other one, we had income and expenses and the difference. And in this one, we have financy terms, assets and liabilities. And so the assets, oh, I want to go back to the weird name, balance sheet. Most people call it that, also called statement of financial position. So where that statement of activities was like over that period of time, a balance sheet is like one point in time. So it's as of a certain date. Income statements from this date to this date, balance sheets as of today. It's usually the end of a period. And it tells the story of like from the beginning of time till now. So as of today, and you can think about it like your checking account. As of today, what do I have in the bank? And that is really the most fun part about the balance sheet is right at the top is you're going to see what cash you have in the bank. You're going to see the questions. How much cash do we have? Do we have some savings? If I'm looking at this organization, I'm going to say, oh, we got 100 grand in cash. Is there savings hiding anywhere else? No, we don't have any savings. Got some answers there. And so the balance sheet has assets and it has liabilities and it has the difference. Assets are, this is how I remember it. Assets are things we own. Liabilities are things we owe. The difference between what we own and what we owe is what our organization is worth, what our net assets are. It's just different language for that. So the top part's going to be stuff the good stuff, cash, invoices out to grantors that they're going to pay, all that valuable furniture and iPads we have. The liability is going to be stuff we owe employees, stuff we owe the electric company, stuff we owe the bank. So some short term, what's due in the next year, and then some longer term, if we have a mortgage, if we have multi-year debt to folks. And then what we're worth. And we divide that into a couple of categories that most of you are probably painfully familiar with, which is restricted, what has restrictions on it, and what's ours to use, what's unrestricted. And those are the balance sheet and income statement. And that's really what I want you to think about in those statements. And then of course, what those key questions it's answering are, because it's way more interesting to look at it if you know what you're looking for rather than trying to read every line. Okay. And there's some more little tidbits about balance sheets in here you can read later. I think I want to go to dashboards. So we're going to take a look at, I'll just show you what else is in the toolkit for you, but I really want to get to dashboards because I think dashboards will be a cool way for you to think about like, one thing is like you could all take the financial oversight checklist and just fill it out yourselves or find a way to introduce it in your organization. And the second thing I would say is like, it's a kind of a fun project to create a dashboard with your organization. Like the checklist, it can kind of prompt a lot of other conversations. It can be the first domino, but it can be a good way to come together, a way where everyone's like, I would like a little more information that's quite a bit easier to read. Thank you. And so this is the approach to dashboards that I teach, which is there's too many numbers on financial statements. So think about your dashboard as like one sheet of paper that is, caters to a certain audience, and it tells them the most important things about the organization. And although these are secret financial dashboards, we always start with the purpose of our organization because it's why everyone's here. So instead of leading with like loss or something like that, we lead with why are we here? And let's put a number somehow to it, right? Got to be careful here because we don't want to objectify our clients and we don't want to try to, oversimplify what we do. And we don't want to fall into any of the traps around measurement. But so it might be a picture of an art piece that one of our students did or something, but to really ground all of us in the purpose. And then so we got the why, and then we go to the how, and then we can start to get into some of the numbers talk, but it doesn't have to look like that financial statement. So we want to talk about resources. How much money do we have? How much money do we need? How are we doing towards our goal? And then we want to think about the other how, which is humans, right? The people that drive the work. So some important metrics around people. What's our retention rate? What's our staff, like how quick are we filling openings? How many openings do we have right now? What's our average salary? How much are we spending on training? Lots of ways to get people to focus on the financial investment in, getting the money and getting the people we need to do our work. And then, now you've sucked them in and now they're going to read that last line, which is some of the more nitty gritty finance stuff, but still really important. What's it costing to do our work? How's that changing over time? Are we doing it according to plan or not? What's the impact on our cash? Are we taking on a bunch of debt? some metrics you can use there. And then what does the future look like? Are we going to have a lot of cash at year end? Something like that. So this is not meant to be like a total blueprint, but just an idea about how you could approach dashboards. And we're going to take a look.
Amy, before you
yes,
keep on going, can you give an example for that top headline, right, around impact? Do you have any good example from an organization you've either been at when you were CFO or have worked with in other capacities where you saw a good approach to that big reason why we're all here that wasn't dehumanizing, but did help for folks to really orient themselves around this is why the finances are important?
Yeah. I mean, certainly I do think like I do like the numbers. I mean, I'm kind of a numbers person. So I don't think it's dehumanizing to say our collective work has, or the number of people in our collective community that have been impacted or touched by our work is 14,000 people. Like, I don't need to know, well, how much did we spend on each of those? Or, I don't need to necessarily see all of that, but like, I love starting with this idea because we can all get so siloed in our work and so like head down in our work. And especially as a finance person, I love being like, what? I come in every day and we have worked in partnership with 1,000 people. That's so cool. So thinking about that, like some kind of a number or a metric or a story that tells us how wide our work spreads. I also I like if this were a board dashboard or a board set of reports, I would actually have, I've heard them called like mission moments or, an actual story, which is instead of taking numbers, really taking it down to the very individual level, which is like, one of our teachers is going to share our story. He started his class at interagency schools, and he taught at the Queen Anne School where folks are coming out of recovery. And here's what one of the students said after participating in the blah, blah, blah exercise. So really bringing it down to the very specific, which is like, I'm going to tell you one story about one teacher going into one classroom and talking to one student. This is the impact of our work. So I think that micro, macro, both of those can be useful. And you'll know in your organization if like, is it a time for numbers or is it a time for stories or is it a time for, just just a picture of all the people coming together for a meeting. Sometimes that can be enough too.
I love that. And I'd actually love to share a story really quickly too, if you don't mind. And could you actually switch back to that previous slide that you were on, just because I found it to be such a helpful visual.
Yes.
I can try to align my story with that framing.
Yes. Oh, wait. Okay.
Sorry, Amy.
I can see it now, and now I will let you see it.
Thank you.
Okay, there it is.
Wonderful. So I just wanted to say that I wish I had a dashboard like this and support in developing one like this when I first came into an organization that I used to be the executive director of. That organization was an incredibly important, meaningful organization for BIPOC communities. It was a nonprofit assistance center, now called Communities Rise. It was the first BIPOC capacity builder in this region. And yet, when I came in, it had pretty much been cut off at the knees by the recession. And there was only a half-time staff. The board was down to 6, and the board had been trying to run the organization for like last year. The organization had more debt than it had assets at that point, really, because they had taken out a line of credit and drawn on it to pay for staff salaries and trying to keep things together. And they had been heavily reliant on public funding prior to the recession. So when the recession hit, right, like it took a huge blow in terms of the funding sources that were coming into the organization. So I just say all this to paint a picture of kind of where we were at and what I walked into. And then to speak to like where we are, right? So where we're going and then the organizational culture. Everyone was in a panic about where we are. There was very little capacity or attention to where we were going, because we were just all, folks were flailing and exhausted on where we are. And the organizational culture was one of panic. And when I would have conversations with the board, we weren't talking about the impact, that big headline reason about why we're here, why we're important. We weren't even really talking about resources in terms of fundraising that much or the human part of it. The board, in part because they have been trying to run the organization, was digging into why are we spending so much on postage? You're going out to meetings. Why are you spending so much on parking? Even though the city of Seattle is so expensive to park and drive around, and it's not to blame any of these individuals. I think it was a traumatic experience and situation that folks were in. And it was traumatic for me to be trying to figure out a way through and out to a better place. But I find this reframing so powerful because I think the conversation I really needed to have with the board and the conversation I needed to be operating off of in terms of how I was organizing my own time and energy was being able to first and foremost really be clear on why we're here, why we're doing this. That's actually what I needed to be talking to board and staff and funders and stakeholders about. Not so much why do we have debt or why are we spending on these particular line items, but why are we still here? Why does this matter? What community need are we meeting, and are we needed in order to meet? What can we grow into? And then how do we raise the money to actually do that? Less so about how do we, yes, absolutely pay down the debt. And there was a whole thing about that I can talk about another time, but more so, how do we bring in money to get to the vision and the strategy that we know is critical and is meaningful and is valuable? And then how do we make sure that we have the incredible humans that we need to do this work and that they can sustain themselves and be well and not be traumatized more by doing the work? And then digging into what parts of the financial reports and which particular line items, if any, does it make sense for us to be looking at in order to strategize around? I just want to say that because I think that having the dashboard not only it shapes the narrative, right? It shapes the conversation. It shapes the way we think about it. I think it influences the energy of the conversation and the energy people bring into it. And I think it also helps us prioritize where we should be spending more time and where we need our board or other folks to spend time. So I don't know if that resonates with folks, but I just wanted to share that experience because, it's been such a huge influential experience in my life, and that I try to always remember and ground myself in as I think about the incredible community work that you all do and what we can do to both, one, acknowledge and empathize, and then two, support you in being able to equip yourselves and orient your team in a way that actually helps you do your job and helps the organization achieve its mission. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks,
Thank
Amy.
you. Thanks, Sarah. It's so helpful to hear how these challenges and solutions show up in the real world. So thank you so much. Anyone else have anything? We were getting some notes in the chat that it definitely resonates. Cool. And some hearts. Yay. Thanks, Sarah. I'm gonna show you some dashboards now, just because, we like to look at I'm gonna show you a little bit of what's in this toolkit too. Just a couple minutes on that. And then I would love to hear just some ideas from folks about what's working at their organizations around communicating and reporting. There we go. I'm gonna go to screen 2 just in case. I want to make sure I can switch tabs and stuff on. Yeah. Okay. So this is the little Excel spreadsheet you're going to get, it's got that checklist in it. I won't go through some of this, but I'm happy. One of the resources we're going to provide for you is we do have this finance helpline, and it's an email, not a phone, but I do like to picture it like a dashboard or like one of those old operator boards. Hello, this is Amy. Did you have a financial question? That's what it is. It's me answering your emails. So we'll give you the email at the end, and we can talk about any of this more. Income statement. So just some basic ratios that you could calculate if you want to get into that kind of stuff. Love some ratios. And then a balance sheet here, because it's more complicated than the income statement. I've just got some sort of like little answers, how you answer your questions over here, and just talking about the different areas there. You can kind of just use it as a little primer. Okay, so here's an example of a dashboard. I should probably come up with a better impact piece than metrics because I'm the old CFO, so I love my numbers. But you can see this follows the sort of flow of that dashboard, and this is how you might bring it here. I think really focusing on that less is more with finance, because we just get overwhelmed by too many numbers, and then making sure you really walk people through what's this telling me. But you can see here, instead of 2 or 4 sheets of numbers, we've just got a couple different areas, and I might even like put boxes around these. I like to make things different colors, just to make it aesthetically pleasing. But this has an impact section. It's looking at, you know, the month, the year to date, the budget, last year. Comparisons are great things to put into dashboards. How far we've come, how far we have to go, where we want to go next year. This one uses just some simple highlighting the cells in different colors. Like you can get real crazy with this stoplight stuff where you're putting in formulas and all of that. Or you can just make it really simple and just say, hey, this is a good thing, and here's where we're falling a little bit behind. And that might be where you tell some stories about what's going so great, and where are things a little bit more like, oh, we're watching that. Then resources, so some of the money stuff. Same, you know, I would use, you know, on this one, we're using like the same time frames. So it's that repetitive. So we're really getting people to understand, like, here's what's happening now, the year, last year, next year. And then a people section, you can put a story in here, like, Sarah just got back from a 3-month sabbatical. Here's a great photo that to share from that. Or you can put some metrics in there. And then some other financial metrics. You know, everyone's interested in cash. This just takes cash divided by your monthly expenses. Lots of ways to do metrics if you want some more different kinds of ways than just putting the number there. And then fun to do graphs. Important, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 numbers. Here's another dashboard. This is more of a board dashboard. So one thing I learned a long time ago when I was the CFO at Fair Start was if I told the board what to think about the financial results, they would believe me eventually. And so I really fell in love with the idea of a narrative, which is me telling them what to think about the financials. If they do nothing else, I would say, besides read my narrative and my summary dashboard, please do that before the board meeting. So they get the critical information they need. They don't have to search for it, so they're not going to accidentally run into postage costs. I'm still going to give them the financial statements, but this pretty thing's going to be on top. Then I tell them in really clear terms, we are doing well overall. It's because of this. It's because of this and this. Here's what we expect moving forward. Then I've like done their work for them. I've analyzed the financial statements for them. I've told them what to think, and we can get on to some really big important things, or I can just deal with questions that they have. I put some pictures in, not because I find those useful, but because people like it when they break up the numbers with pictures, and pictures and graphs are cool. Okay, that's my 5-minute spiel on the tools you're getting. And I will send you the Excel so you can just borrow some of the formatting if you want. Oh, I guess I stopped share there. And I would love to hear more stories about what is working for folks. We've got about 7 minutes left. I will put up another slide that has some contact information. But what have you found that is working for you from a perspective of reporting that you'd like to share with the group? I know some of you have stuff. I'll take it. I'm going to share my screen again so that your face will be small, because sometimes it's easier to share when your face is small. There we go.
I know for us, when I was looking at redoing our financial statements or dashboard, first I looked at what wasn't working anymore, because that was the most glaringly obvious to me, because our old setup just, it wasn't working. It made me feel like I was having to like make up stuff, and that is usually my indicator that it's not working. Which sounds silly, but it is. So I indicated what wasn't working, which was mostly that it needed to be redone and just like a new template and just start from scratch, which was a sad day to find that out, but also really good because it helped us move along. And then I really sat down with like our finance committee and asked in several different ways what they wanted to see, because I don't think that they knew how to verbalize what they wanted to see. And that's something I've learned over time, is a lot of people just don't know how to verbalize what they need around finances, because of the words and the scariness around it. So really just bringing it down to like, and it also helped them to feel a part of too. Like, what do you want to see? What information can I bring to you? What is something that you look for? What is something you're measuring? Really like getting that feedback so that it was kind of like a collaborative effort. That really did well for us and helped us kind of build some trust with the board again as well, which is really important in the process too. Yeah, so just collaborativeness, I would say, did really, really well for us. And I just started letting people know, like, it's not healthy for one person to hold finances in any capacity. Even you can even look at families, really. It's too much for one person. So really like trying to delegate out small things, simple things to start, and giving a lot of praise to people when they do things correctly has been a really great thing as well. And then also just taking those learning opportunities for people, not depriving them of those learning opportunities of when they do something incorrectly, and making sure that you let them know that. I know for myself, I was taking on a lot of the edits of things instead of letting people know how they could fix it going forward. And that also created way too much burden too. So that's my advice there.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. That's fantastic. I can't find a clock right now. Oh yes, see, we're really at the end. I would love to hear some more stories from you. And also, I recognize that we're at the end of our time together, but I do want to just say a couple more things. First of all, thank you so much for sharing and being willing to speak up today. It was a small group, and so it was great to hear from some of you, and all of you. It was great to be in community with every single one of you. Thank you, Sarah, for providing the space for co-piloting with me and sharing your really valuable wisdom with the group too. And thanks for trusting me as a peer in the community and letting me be a part of this community and talk about this stuff. And thank you, Alyssa, for your tech support today. FKD Consulting is so fantastic. And also, please, please, please copy this email down, amy@amythecoach.com. We will be sending you a follow-up email with that in there. And so please consider reaching out to the finance helpline. As you were all talking with each other, I was thinking, oh, I've been wanting to do like a little joint conversation. So if you're interested in continuing to talk to your colleagues about this particular topic as sort of a follow-up to the workshop, please email me. Email the finance helpline at amy@amythecoach.com. And what we do with those is we get an inquiry and then we schedule like an hour-long conversation to follow up on your, and you can certainly do that about other topics. But also, if you're interested in a group conversation, drop me a line and I will set up one of those hours and invite everybody to come that was on in this presentation. So we will email you the follow-up materials. Anything I'm missing? before we wrap? Any final questions or comments that you'd like to share with the group, aside from the lovely things you're putting in the chat? Oh, please do come to the next one. We'll put the link to that in the email also.
Well, I just want to echo my gratitude to each of you for making the time, for being here today, and most importantly, for like engaging in this conversation and sharing your experiences, both the challenges and the things that are getting better, right? It's always an evolving journey. And it's often a hard one, but I have found in my own experience that what makes it better and more enjoyable is when we actually get to be in community with each other in a trusted and supported way. And so I really do hope that you will, one, definitely reach out to Amy with any follow-up questions. But also, like Amy said, we have actually been trying to create more opportunities for like a shared conversation, just as we've been having today. And I know that there's a lot we didn't even get to dive further into. So it would be wonderful if we could, come back together and have a conversation again one more time before the end of the year, even outside of, the next workshop, but be able to continue some of the things we're talking about. And lastly, I want to also echo my thanks to Alyssa again for helping to coordinate and bring the logistics of this workshop together and supporting the tech today. And then most of all to Amy, a trusted colleague and friend and ally, and someone who I'm just so glad we're able to partner with, who, really walks the talk about having the humility and the grace to share what she knows, to support our incredible leaders, and also to always be learning. And I love that about you, Amy. That you come in with so much gratitude for what you learn from everybody who's here. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody. I see Rebecca's down for shared conversation, so that's exciting. Hopefully others of you will be interested too. Just let Amy know, and we can coordinate that.
Cool.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.